Your sexual desire is not random, it is not accidental, and it is not separate from who you are. In the first seconds of this video, I want to say something that may feel uncomfortable, but deeply liberating once understood. What you desire is one of the most honest expressions of your psyche. Not the version of you that behaves, not the version that adapts, but the version that lives beneath social rules, moral expectations, and conscious control. Carl Jung understood this clearly. He did not see sexual desire as something to suppress or glorify. He saw it as symbolic energy, a psychic signal emerging from the unconscious, pointing toward parts of the self that want to be seen, integrated, and lived. This is why desire often feels irrational, why it ignores logic, why it resists control. It is not trying to make you comfortable, it is trying to make you whole. Many women are taught to judge their desire, to label it inappropriate, excessive, confusing, or wrong. Others are taught to disconnect from it entirely, performing desire for others while remaining inwardly numb. Jung warned that both repression and dissociation come at a psychological cost, because when desire is ignored, it does not disappear. It goes underground, and underground, it distorts. Desire that is not understood becomes compulsion. Desire that is shamed becomes anxiety. Desire that is denied becomes self-betrayal. Jung believed that libido, psychic energy, always seeks expression, and when blocked, it finds indirect paths. This is why patterns repeat, why attraction returns in familiar shapes, why you may feel drawn to the same types of people, dynamics, or fantasies again and again, even when they no longer serve you. Your psyche is not sabotaging you. It is communicating with you. If this already resonates, pause for a moment. Subscribe to Inner Wise Woman and write love in the comments. This space is for women who are ready to understand themselves without shame and without illusion. Desire is never just about the body. It is about meaning. Who you desire often symbolizes what you are disconnected from within yourself. Strength, freedom, tenderness, authority, surrender, power, innocence, depth. These qualities often appear first as attraction before they are consciously recognized as inner needs. Jung observed that we project unlived aspects of ourselves onto others. This is especially true in erotic attraction. The person you long for is rarely just a person. They are a mirror carrying something your psyche wants to reclaim. This is why desire can feel so overwhelming. It carries psychic weight. And this is also why suppressing it never works. Suppression treats desire as an enemy instead of a messenger. But Jung was clear. What you resist persists, and what you listen to transforms. Understanding desire does not mean indulging every impulse. It means translating its language, asking not, how do I get this, but what is this pointing to in me? This shift, from acting out desire to interpreting it, marks the beginning of psychological maturity, and it changes everything. When we begin to look more closely at attraction, something unsettling becomes clear. Desire rarely chooses what is easy, logical, or socially approved. Instead, it gravitates toward what is unresolved, incomplete, or hidden within us. Carl Jung understood attraction not as preference, but as psychic magnetism, a pull generated by the unconscious toward what it needs in order to evolve. This is why attraction often feels disproportionate. You might feel drawn to someone who doesn't fit your values, your plans, or even your conscious wishes. You might ask yourself, why this person? Why this intensity? Why now? Jung would say the answer is not found in the other person, but in the inner image they activate within you. Attraction is the psyche recognizing something symbolic. Very often, what you desire represents a quality you have not yet fully claimed. A woman drawn to emotionally unavailable partners may unconsciously be disconnected from her own emotional authority. A woman magnetized to powerful, dominant figures may be seeking access to her own suppressed strength. A woman longing for tenderness, safety, or fusion may be touching an unhealed inner vulnerability that wants care, not consumption. Desire, in this sense, is diagnostic. It shows you where your psyche is unfinished. Jung spoke extensively about projection, especially in romantic and sexual relationships. Projection occurs when unconscious aspects of the self are experienced as belonging to someone else. In attraction, projection intensifies because erotic energy amplifies psychic imagery. The other person becomes charged with meaning they do not actually possess on their own. This is why early attraction can feel almost mystical. You don't just see the person, you feel possessed by the experience of them. Their presence seems to awaken parts of you that were dormant. Your energy shifts, your imagination activates, your sense of identity loosens. Jung would say this is because libido is moving, and where libido moves, consciousness follows. But here is the critical distinction Jung makes. Projection feels like union, but it is actually division. When you project an inner quality outward, you lose conscious access to it. You believe it lives in the other, and as long as you believe that, you remain dependent. This is why desire can become painful, not because desire itself is wrong, but because projection creates imbalance. You begin to orbit someone who appears larger than life, while you feel smaller, incomplete, or lacking. Your worth subtly becomes tied to their availability, attention, or approval. The psyche, however, never intends for projection to last forever. Projection exists to be withdrawn. Its purpose is to lead you toward awareness. This is where many women struggle. When attraction fades, when desire shifts, or when disappointment sets in, it can feel like loss. But Jung would say, this is actually integration beginning. The psyche is asking you to reclaim what you gave away. The question then becomes, can you tolerate seeing clearly? Because clarity dismantles fantasy, and fantasy is emotionally intoxicating. When desire is unconscious, it demands possession. When desire becomes conscious, it demands responsibility. This is why some people prefer to remain confused. Confusion allows longing to continue without accountability. Awareness, on the other hand, requires you to face yourself. It requires you to ask why you want what you want and what that wanting is doing to your inner balance. Jung believed that when desire is understood, it transforms from compulsion into information. It no longer drives behavior blindly, it becomes a guide. For women especially, this shift is powerful. Instead of asking, how do I get him? Or, why can't I stop wanting this? The question becomes, what part of me is asking for expression through this desire? That question opens the door to maturity. It allows desire to evolve from something that controls you into something that teaches you. You stop being at war with your impulses and start listening to their intelligence. You realize that attraction is not demanding action. It is demanding interpretation. This is where desire stops being dangerous and starts becoming meaningful. But many women have been taught that understanding desire means indulging it, or that restraint means denial. Jung rejected both extremes. He believed the psyche requires conscious relationship with its energies, not blind obedience or moral suppression. Desire that is neither acted out nor crushed becomes transformed, and transformation is the goal. When desire moves from the surface of attraction into the deeper layers of the psyche, it inevitably enters the territory Jung called the shadow. This is where sexual desire becomes most misunderstood, because the shadow contains everything we were taught not to want, not to feel, and not to be. And yet, the shadow is not evil. It is simply unconscious. Many women carry desires that feel contradictory to their conscious identity. You may see yourself as gentle, composed, responsible, and controlled, yet feel drawn to intensity, surrender, danger, or emotional extremes. Or you may identify as strong, independent, and self-sufficient, yet secretly long for softness, being held, or losing control. Jung would say this tension is not pathology, it is psychic imbalance seeking correction. Desire often reaches into the shadow because the shadow holds unlived life. What was forbidden, discouraged, or shamed early on does not disappear. It waits. And sexual desire, more than any other psychic force, has the power to break through repression. This is why certain fantasies feel irrational, embarrassing, or even frightening. They don't align with the image you have built of yourself. But that misalignment is precisely the point. The psyche uses desire to reveal where identity has become too narrow. When desire is ignored or judged, it doesn't soften, it intensifies. Jung warned that repression does not create virtue, it creates distortion. A woman who denies her erotic vitality may become emotionally numb, resentful, or chronically dissatisfied. A woman who suppresses her hunger for depth may unconsciously seek chaos. A woman who refuses to acknowledge her darker longings may project them onto others and feel haunted by attraction she doesn't understand. Shadow desire is not asking to be acted out blindly. It is asking to be recognized consciously. This is where shame becomes the greatest obstacle to wholeness. Shame tells you that what you desire disqualifies you from being good, mature, or spiritual. Jung rejected this moral splitting. He believed that a divided psyche, one part acceptable, the other rejected, can never be whole. Sexual desire becomes destructive only when it remains unconscious. When desire is unconscious, it controls behavior. When desire is conscious, it becomes symbolic. And when it is symbolic, it becomes transformative. This is the point where many women experience a profound internal shift. Instead of being possessed by longing, they begin to observe it. Instead of judging their fantasies, they ask what psychic energy is asking for expression. They notice patterns, they see repetition, they recognize the same themes appearing in different forms across time. Jung would say, repetition is the psyche insisting you listen. Desire linked to the shadow often carries archetypal energy. It may express power, submission, destruction, rebirth, merging, or transcendence. These are not merely sexual themes, they are existential ones. They point to how you relate to control, vulnerability, identity, and transformation itself. This is why sexual desire cannot be separated from identity. It is not a side appetite. It is a map of psychic orientation. A woman who understands her desire understands where her psyche wants to expand. She no longer needs to chase people who embody her projections. She can integrate the qualities she once sought outside herself. This does not eliminate attraction, but it changes its structure. Instead of craving what she lacks, she begins to choose what resonates. This is the difference between compulsion and choice. Jung believed that maturity is not the absence of desire, but the ability to hold it without being consumed by it. Desire then becomes a source of vitality rather than chaos. It fuels creativity, presence, depth, and aliveness. It stops fragmenting the self and starts unifying it. This is also where peace begins to replace conflict. When desire is understood, it no longer needs to shout. It no longer needs to sabotage. It no longer needs to erupt through symptoms or destructive patterns. It becomes integrated energy. And integration is always quieter than repression or indulgence. When desire is no longer feared, denied, or blindly acted out, it undergoes its final and most important transformation. It becomes awareness. This is where Carl Jung located the true purpose of desire, not pleasure, not indulgence, not morality, but individuation. Individuation is the process of becoming who you truly are, beyond roles, expectations, and borrowed identities. And desire, when consciously engaged, is one of the most precise instruments the psyche uses to guide this process. At this stage, desire no longer pulls you outward compulsively. It turns inward. It asks not for satisfaction, but for understanding. You begin to notice that what once felt urgent now feels informative. What once demanded action now invites reflection. The intensity remains, but its direction changes. This is where many women experience a quiet but profound relief. You no longer feel split between what you want and who you believe you should be. You stop seeing desire as an enemy to discipline or a weakness to overcome. Instead, you recognize it as raw psychic material, energy that can either fragment you or refine you, depending on how consciously you relate to it. Jung believed that when libido is integrated, it does not disappear. It becomes life force. It fuels creativity, intuition, insight, and emotional depth. Sexual desire, in this sense, is not just about sex. It is about vitality, about how alive you allow yourself to be. This is why suppressing desire often leads to depression, apathy, or chronic dissatisfaction, and why compulsively chasing desire leads to exhaustion and instability. Both paths miss the same point. Desire is not meant to be obeyed or silenced. It is meant to be understood. As awareness grows, you may notice that your attractions change. You are no longer magnetized to chaos, unavailability, or intensity without substance. You are drawn instead to presence, integrity, and emotional truth. Not because you forced yourself to want better, but because your psyche has reorganized itself. You stop seeking completion through another body, another fantasy, another promise. You start recognizing completeness as an inner state. This is where desire aligns with dignity. And when desire and dignity meet, a woman becomes psychologically sovereign. She is no longer controlled by longing. She is no longer ashamed of wanting. She is no longer fragmented by fantasy. She is awake. This does not make her less passionate. It makes her more real. Her desire is no longer compulsive, it is chosen, no longer symbolic of lack. It is expressive of fullness. Jung believed that wholeness is not purity. It is inclusion. It is the capacity to hold opposing forces, light and shadow, restraint and longing, independence and intimacy, without splitting the self. Sexual desire, once integrated, becomes one of the most honest expressions of this wholeness. If this understanding is resonating, if you feel your relationship to desire shifting from confusion to clarity, subscribe to Inner Wise Woman. This space is for women who are no longer interested in suppressing themselves or losing themselves, but in becoming whole. The final truth Jung pointed toward is simple, but profound. Desire reveals who you are becoming, not who you pretend to be, not who you were told to be, but who your psyche is slowly shaping you into. When you stop running from desire, stop fighting it, and stop obeying it blindly, it stops controlling you. It starts guiding you. And what it guides you toward is not indulgence, it is truth.